marqué T2. Et T2, c'est effectivement Trainspotting 2, mais c'est aussi Terminator 2. Et c'est intentionnel. It's intentional. You knew it. Vous le saviez. Can you explain why T2?
Well, it was really important when we were preparing the film. I really didn't want to call it Trainspotting 2. It's difficult to explain why, but when you're working, you don't want to feel like you're making a sequel. You are making a sequel, obviously, but you don't want to feel like you're making one. You don't want to feel like you're doing a replica. So we had all these other titles that we wanted to call it, like one of the things we were going to use at one point was The Least Unfamiliar, which is a terrible title, and I know it's a terrible title, but it was a way of creating an independence almost from the original film. Anyway, we got a lot of grief off the studio and everybody involved money-wise because they need the name Trainspotting. So we said, well, what would the characters call it if they were forced to do a sequel? What would they want to call it? And I said, well, they'd call it T2, both as an homage to James Cameron and also to annoy him, so because those are the kind of people that they are. So, unfortunately, you can legally call the film T2 because, in fact, that's just a nickname for the Cameron masterpiece. But, of course, if you put it into search engines for booking tickets, it causes confusion. So we had to add Trainspotting at the end of it. So now you get both. You get T2 Trainspotting, but and everybody will call it Trainspotting 2. I know they will. And anyway,
I will call it T2.
And I love the James Cameron movie. That is a great sequel. But anyway.
Et il se trouve que sur YouTube, vous pouvez trouver un mash-up entre la voix du trailer de Trainspotting avec la voix de Ewan McGregor sur des images de T2, et c'est vraiment formidable. It's a sequel, but you didn't want to make a sequel, really, but you had to go through some key moments of the first film that became iconic and that you knew you were obliged to use in the sequel.
Yeah, in the sense that I think it's weird, the film, because the characters sort of know there was a film about them. It's almost like that in a way. It has a kind of presence like that.
In the first one or
No, in this one.
Yeah, in this
they
one.
Sort of know there's an earlier iteration of it, really.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they refer to it. It's like when Spud comes out of the boxing and it's this memory. It's a memory of the film as well as a memory of the occasion, and so it has that weird duality about it, really. And we wanted the earlier film to speak to the modern film and vice versa, really. There's about a minute of the earlier film in it. It feels like more, I think, but they're very particularly chosen, these moments of resonance where you try and amplify the experience of the film now by this sense of the past and and we didn't want to make a sequel. What I understand by a sequel, in a way, is
just going to translate the first. Effectivement, le film résonne. Les deux films résonnent ensemble. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a des moments d'intrusion du premier film qui sont, comme vous l'avez vu, qui sont dans cette suite. Notamment et on a surtout l'impression que les personnages sont conscients qu'on fait un film sur eux. Comme le passage effectivement de Spud qui fait de la boxe. Et c'est ces moments-là que vraiment traquait Dany Boyle, ces moments de surconscience en fait, où les deux films résonnent et font écho.
What I understand by a sequel is really you make it very quickly after the first one and you make a replica of the first one. You kind of repeat the formula very quickly because it's done very well. That's the only reason to make one, and there's an appetite for it. Whereas we wanted there to be a reason to make it deeper than commercial reasons. There's nothing wrong with commercial, and you want films to work, but we tried with the original. Irving Welsh originally wrote a book called Porno, and we tried to adapt that, and we did do an adaptation of it, and it was like a basic adaptation. It was faithful and okay, but it felt like it wasn't a good enough reason to, so we abandoned it. We didn't even send it to the actors. And then we did something a bit more personal, really, and it is quite weirdly, you wouldn't think it in a sequel, but it is very personal film partly about well, it's obviously about time, but it's really about masculinity over time, really, and which is something, you know, how bad men are at aging. They just are terrible at it. They're kind of constantly trying to relive the bravado of the first film. And I speak for myself, for the writer, and for the actors, and the characters. We're all in that same boat, really, I think.
Yeah, just Iggy Pop.
Yeah, so, well, you've seen the movie, so it's obviously Iggy Pop is suspended across the movie, access to it. Because obviously that's a kind of, everybody would be, you know, if you made a sequel, a straight sequel, it would start off with Lust for Life. You know, you do exactly the same thing again. You know. So we put him on a running machine, and he's running to nowhere like you do these days, and certainly when you get older and you're exercising to try and keep fit and hang on to your youth, and he's on this running machine, and it's not Iggy Pop. And in fact, he can't play Iggy Pop, because he just has quite a lot to resolve, really. I think he's lost his voice, really. That was the reason we didn't have a voiceover. Because obviously the voiceover is a key ingredient of the first film. It's a big comfort to everybody, because it's somebody to guide you through a pretty weird landscape of accents and behaviour, and we didn't want any of that. We thought he's lost his voice, really. He's certainly lost his confidence. He's in real crisis, so he has to speak for himself when he can, and he can't speak with Iggy yet, so you have to wait until the end of the movie. And then we got this amazing remix. So the Prodigy, the guy from Prodigy, Liam, who runs Prodigy, rang me up and said, he said, I hear you're doing Trainspotting 2, and I went to explain, no, it's not called Trainspotting 2. I don't want to make it.
But at least in familiar.
Yeah, I didn't bother explaining to him. He said, do you want to hear it? And he sent me in like 50 seconds of what he was working on. It was amazing. So that, we thought we'd be able to use that at the end. And so it kind of like a thin spider thread, it arcs over the movie waiting to be played in a way.
Post-Pop Depression, qui est le dernier album d'Iggy Pop. Je ne sais pas si vous connaissez, mais c'est une espèce d'hommage à toutes les icônes pop qui sont mortes, notamment David Bowie. Un sublime album, et qui fait, je trouve, écho aux problématiques de Trainspotting 2. Did you know the album? Have you listened to it? Yeah, and do you see the connection between this album and your movie?
Yeah, very much so, and it was amazing. So I had to ring him up to ask his permission. I mean, you can get permission to use the songs through the record company. You have to pay money. But if you want to kind of do a remix or change anything, you've got to really get permission of the artist. So I got on the phone with him, and I was trying to explain to him about the film and how we do. You know, I didn't assume that he'd watched the first film or anything like that. And
you didn't know?
Well, but he knew everything, and he knew the book. He knew the Irving Welsh book, because in the Irving Welsh book is an amazing chapter where Tommy goes to Glasgow from Edinburgh and watches Iggy Pop in concert. And I was explaining this to Iggy, and I said, and Tommy says that Iggy says on stage, and he said the line, then on the phone he said, Scotland takes drugs in psychic defence. And so he knew the book, he could quote the book, which was amazing, really. So he's a very learned man. You wouldn't think it from what the dose you get of him, but he's a really amazing guy. And I love that album. I thought it was an amazing album. He chose those partners, Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age, and the guy from Arctic Monkeys, and you can hear their influence on the songs very clearly. It's a real collaboration. It's a wonderful thing for a guy to do in his 70s, you know, he's in his 70s now, so. And amazing on stage still bouncing around, you know, on stage. Kind of trying to know the movies like 28 Days Later and things like that, and people would ask about it, and I'd say 10 years, you know, it's not enough. Because the actors hadn't aged, because they were, and I used to joke that they'd moisturised, and they were always in the spa, and they were, you know, they really looked after themselves. But I think, if I'm absolutely honest, I didn't really want to make it then, because I didn't think there was anything really to make it about, not really. And then, a couple of years ago when we started, I knew there was, like, this passage of time, and I knew the actors would show time on them much more, so that you had that duality of... Film is weird, isn't it? It doesn't matter what you make a film about. Even Daniel Blake glamorises actors. It just does. I mean, it's just one of the chemical things we do by watching film, is we glamorise actors, the people up there. And it's amazing to be able to destroy that, because you have an image in your mind of them, of Renton, you know, coming out of that toilet, and then there's this old man. Well, he's not old man, but he's like 46. And he's really close up in that mirrored room, and he's got lines all over his face, and that, you know, I think it returns them to us in a way, that we're all on that same path. And if you don't care about time yet, as some of you probably don't, you will. It's in the post, believe me. You know, and I think that it's kind of, there's a wonderful thing about it that you can do with a sequel if you have a reason to make it, I think. So, and 10 years wasn't enough to us to emphasise that. And because we'd seen them in the previous movie, and they knew they were de-glamorising that image every day. They knew they didn't look like what they looked like before. So they bring their own kind of like, it's their own material they're bringing. So they're picking up the clothes or the shoes of the character they play, but they're matrixing in their, Matrix, not a good sequel. Matrixing in their experience, their own experience of 20 years. And indeed, it's very weird coming to Paris. And I'm not just saying this because I'm here, I do say this elsewhere as well. You get the best questions in Paris from journalists. Seriously. And so this woman said to me today, she said, so the film is about opportunity and betrayal, yeah? And I said, yeah. She said, and that's true of you three, isn't it? Who made the original film. Because you betrayed each other, didn't you? And it's true of how you behaved to Ewan McGregor, isn't it, as well? So in a way, it's kind of, and she was absolutely right. I mean, it's absolutely true. There is some truth in that. He's so observant of her. Because I would not declare that up front. I would not put that in the press notes. But that was a shadow running through, like a kind of spineless shark running through the whole process, which is that we'd fallen out and we were coming back together again. Why were we coming back together again? Because it was an opportunity. Are we going to share the credit? You know, there was all these things going on as well. And you only get that in Paris, that kind of analysis. Anyway, where was I? So, but it's really about the film. We knew what the film was about because they were clearly, with desperate efforts, they were trying to renew their bravado of the first film. Because there's so many scenes like the 1690 scene, the No More Catholics scene, you know, and like the kind of like George Best scene, where they desperately, they even get the gun out like they had in the first film as though they can read, and it doesn't quite work. So you hope there's a lot of fun in it as well, but it's not quite, you can't relive it like that really. Meanwhile, there's all these children running around, because the film is saturated with images of children, both themselves as children and children they fathered and not contributed to their upbringing. And also there's women who don't say very much, but are disappointed in them, really, and what they've done. And that's what they have to move towards. So there's bound to be some melancholy about a combination of those two things. Both the fact that you can't quite get the past back again, though men are terrible at trying to relive it. We are far worse than women at dealing with time. Just like absolutely not good at it. And the fact that they haven't quite come to terms with what they need to do. There is a bit of a movement towards the end. Begbie does go to his son and realises that his son will be a better man than me. But he still doesn't credit the woman who's actually brought the child up while he's been in prison. She's actually turned the boy into something better than Begbie will be, because she didn't want him to become like Begbie. And Renton goes to atone for not being at his mother's funeral, not coming home for 20 years, so he goes to his father, and Spud obviously learns more than anyone that he can fully experience the only comfort in aging is the loop of time, which you will discover one day. The way it loops, very weird. It's very difficult to describe, but as you get older, you kind of begin to sense it as it goes round. Yeah, have you? Well, Proust writes about it, and it's the loop of time. It's just incredible. And it's why grandparents and grandchildren are so close in a way that's baffling. You think, how did that happen? And it's the loop of time that is our only comfort as we slide, really. We led him to believe, I led him to believe that we were going to cast him in The Beach, and we didn't. We cast Leonardo DiCaprio instead, they're both great guys, and he was very hurt by that, and rightly so. It's not something I'm very proud of at all, and something I've not really ever done before. So this journalist was very interesting because she could spot fissures or cracks in, what looks. When you present films, you always present a harmonious kind of working group to the press, But she could spot that actually the film is autobiographical in a way. And Ewan's aware of that as well, and we're all aware of it as we're doing it. You don't own up to it, because also we're very British as well. We don't really talk about emotions, and it's like, so it's, but they run deep, yeah. And so that was very much part of it. And John knew that when he was writing Opportunity and Betrayal. He was writing about me, John, and Andrew, the three who'd done the first three films together, 4 films together, really. And then Ewan and also part of that as well. He was writing about it.